Hey, it's Brian. Welcome to the Awards Contender. I am very excited to welcome back Cody Derricks today to talk about Best Actress, Oscar nominations, and win. 1939. We are discussing, for like the very first time on my channel today, the great Vivien Leigh and her Oscar victory for Gone with the Wind. How are we doing, Cody?
Good. How did you spend your 4 hours watching Gone with the Wind? Were you like watching it the whole time, or did you kind of preoccupy yourself while doing other things?
I was locked in, Cody. I watched like the intermission. I said, I haven't seen Gone with the Wind in probably 15 years.
Yeah.
I got the Blu-ray just for this experience and to look at her performance and talk about her Oscar win. I'm like, I'm going to watch it in full. So we're going to talk about Vivien Leigh today, her performance in Gone with the Wind, her Oscar victory, like why she won. Before we get to Vivien Leigh, we're going to discuss the other four nominees in Best Actress that year. Let's start with Greer Garson, Goodbye, Mr. Chips. She plays the wife of a boarding school teacher. This was her first Oscar nomination. She was like a new star of the screen. The studio was really pushing her. So she gets into Best Actress. What do you think of Garson's performance, Cody, in Goodbye, Mr. Chips?
So Greer Garson is somebody who, if you are an Oscar nerd and you start going back in time, you run into her a lot. She got 7 Oscar nominations. She wins 1. This is her first nomination, I believe.
This is the first one.
Yes, her first one. She eventually wins for Mrs. Miniver. She's not an actress that I really enjoy watching. There's not much power to her, I find. She just kind of does her job. She clocks in, she clocks out. She wins her Oscar for her best performance. So it's one of those cases of like, she eventually did it, and the Oscars, it aligned with her talent and timing and all that. But this performance is, I don't know why it's in this category. This is a supporting performance. She shows up late. She leaves early. She's not there very long. I don't remember her making much of an impression besides being charming. You know, she kind of changes up the energy of the movie because she comes into the titular character's life, but then she's quickly gone. Doesn't make much of an impression, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, Best Supporting Actress is a category that had just started at the Oscars maybe 2 or 3 years before. But typically in like the supporting acting categories, like the late 1930s, it's like character actors for the most part. You don't see like big stars in supporting actor, supporting actress. I think that's what happened to Greer Garson here, because you're right. She's not in the movie for the first 40 minutes. And then she dies, spoiler alerts, giving childbirth off screen. That scene is not even in the movie. Like, you don't see it or anything.
Yeah.
You just hear about it later, and then you never see her again. She's dead.
Yep, we say goodbye, Mrs. Chips.
Goodbye,
never see her again.
Goodbye, Mrs. Chips. So yeah, the movie's about 2 hours long. She's in like the middle 40-ish minutes. She's not in the first act. She's not in the third act. So she should be in supporting actress. It's odd that she's in lead. But yeah, she doesn't do anything spectacular in the movie. You know, she's fine.
She's a new star. Yeah.
She's a new star. I mean, I guess if you look back and knowing she gets like 6 more Oscar nominations, I guess it makes sense that she would get this one. Goodbye, Mr. Chips was a very popular film in 1939. It wins Best Actor. So, in some respects it makes sense, but she had no chance in winning for that. Irene Dunne, Love Affair. She plays a former nightclub singer who falls in love with a French playboy, and she has this emotional arc. Her character is in a car accident, gets paralyzed in the second half. What are your thoughts about Irene Dunne in Love Affair?
Love Affair is fine. It is the first version of An Affair to Remember. It's the same story. So the film has been kind of surpassed by the Deborah Kerr version from the 50s. Yeah. But I think she's lovely. Irene Dunne is weird for me because she gets 5 Oscar nominations. 2 of them I love, and they're both comedies. She's really good in Theodore Goes Wild, and she's unbelievably hilarious in The Awful Truth. It's one of my favorite performances of all time. She's so good. And then she has these nominations for these very like weighed down kind of, again, I would call them Oscar bait before that was a term, movies. So like her first nomination was for Cimarron, which is the worst Best Picture winner of all time. And then she has this, and she has I Remember Mama a few years later, and it's just, they don't really excite me as movies. There's not a ton there for an actor to really dig their teeth into, if you ask me, at least in terms of what interests me for acting. But she's one of those actors who it's like, she should have won an Oscar at some point. This wasn't her year, but at some point she should have won.
Yeah, it's too bad that Dunne never won an Oscar. Garson has one, but not Dunne. And as you said, 5 nominations. She was such a gifted comedian, like The Awful Truth, as you said. She's fantastic in that. I wonder if, like, part of the reason why she didn't have much of a shot to win this year, at the time, she was looked more as a comic actress than a dramatic actress, and maybe Love Affair, like, you know, the slightly more emotional performance in that, it wasn't for everybody. I think, like, of the 10 Best Picture nominees, Cody, for that year, Love Affair is probably the worst one. I rewatched it. I hadn't seen it since high school. It's kind of a slog. I do think An Affair to Remember 1957 with Deborah Kerr and Cary Grant is a much better version of the story. So, yeah, I think the movie kind of lets her down a little bit. She's doing some nice work in it. It's not the best. But it is wild, Cody. We do have to say all 5 of these nominees are in Best Picture nominated films. All 5 of these movies that the actresses are nominated for are in Best Picture. That doesn't happen very often.
Right. I mean, this happened in 2024, the year that Mikey Madsen won for Anora. Every nominee was a Best Picture nominee. And I believe the last time that happened before then was 77, which is Annie Hall, Turning Point gets 2 nominations, Goodbye Girl, and Julia. So it doesn't happen very often. It might be just those 3 times, unless I'm missing one. But even in years where there are more than 5 nominees, the Oscars don't always have a history of favoring female-led stories to male-led stories.
Yeah, but you're right. Oftentimes, you know, Best Picture nominees are more male-centric. And you look at some of these films for 1939, Love Affair, Dark Victory, we're going to talk about. Like, you know, they're very much like more geared toward the female in the movie. And so I think it's kind of great that a lot of these female-centric films got into Best Picture at the Oscars that year, too. Next up is Bette Davis, Dark Victory. Bette Davis, man, did she have a run from the 30s to the 40s in Best Actress at the Oscars. And there's an interview with her, Cody, I think in the 80s, where they asked her, like, you know, what's an Oscar you lost you think you should have won? And she said Dark Victory. But that was the year of Scarlett O'Hara, Vivien Leigh, Gone with the Wind. And so she was gone with the wind, is how she put it in the interview. So, yeah, she doesn't win for this, but she's definitely in the running. In Dark Victory, she plays a socialite with an inoperable brain tumor. She was red hot at the time with 2 Oscar wins in Best Actress in just the last few previous years. What do you think of Bette Davis in Dark Victory?
I think this is one of her better ones. I think she's an actor who I've seen all her nominations, and I think only like 2 of them, of the double digits that she gathers, are anything less than great. The funny thing about her performance here in Dark Victory is that I think you could argue that she's up until this point playing against type in this movie, because her previous win for Jezebel, she's a flinty, almost like very Scarlett O'Hara type role. She gets her first nomination, the write-in one for Of Human Bondage, which is a very, you know, powerful, commanding, gravitational role. And then in this, she is not those things. The movie ends with her, you know, very gently fading away, quite literally. And the movie relies on her, you know, charm and effervescence, which the other movies that she was nominated for before this do as well, but in a different perspective. And I think here she's playing somebody who's incredibly sympathetic. This is like a classic weepy movie, but she's excellent in it. It's one of my favorites.
It might not be like the movie most people think of first when they think of Bette Davis. They probably go to All About Eve, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and stuff. Dark Victory might be thought of before Jezebel and Dangerous, her 2 Oscar wins. I'm not sure if those movies are very famous today. Cody and I did talk about Jezebel, her Oscar win for that film, so go check out that video as well. I just think, Cody, even though like her playing a dying woman in this, it is just catnip for Academy members, and I just think if she hadn't already won 2, like maybe she could have been more in the running, but were they really going to give her a 3rd Academy Award in just a few short years? That might have been overkill.
I think she was the runner-up.
Really? You think
Yes.
you think she's in 2nd place?
I feel pretty strongly about that. Yeah, she was I was reading about this. Besides Shirley Temple, she was the biggest star at the time in terms of box office receipts and public perception. They did not really care about giving Oscars back to back or with expediency back then. You know, it might be overkill for them to give 3 Oscars to Bette Davis in 5 years, but I don't think that was something that voters at the time, this is only the 12th ceremony, were really concerned with. I think it's like, well, of course we give it to Bette Davis. She's our girl. She's playing this great part. It's a different performance from what she's given before. We want to give her as many awards as possible. She gets basically a nomination almost most years of the 30s and 40s. You can see Bette Davis amongst the nominees. So I think it would make a lot of sense for them to have given her an award. And if they did, it would undoubtedly be her best Oscar-winning performance.
Her next film that she's in that wins Best Picture is all about Eve, but that's a very competitive and crowded field, you know, as maybe one day I'll talk about.
That is a 4-hour, that's a Gone with the Wind length video right there.
Yeah. So yeah, I toyed with having Bette Davis in second place. I had to go with Greta Garbo, Ninotchka, where she plays a Soviet woman on a mission, falls in love. It's kind of a looser, more comedic performance from Garbo that audiences weren't totally familiar with. She doesn't get a lot of Oscar nominations, but this is probably her best one near the end of her career. She's only in 1 or 2 movies after this. One of her best performances, for sure, in Ninotchka. What do you think of her in that?
Yeah, this is her 4th and final nomination, and to your point, it's by far her best. Camille, romance, these are very, kind of like boring movies. That the type of movie that's setting the form of the type of movie that would eventually get perfected or rather deepened further down the line. But now in early Hollywood, they're just very basic. Anna Christie, I do like her in Anna Christie quite a bit. It's a very striking performance. But this is doing something totally different. She is hilarious in this movie. She is so deadpan. Before even that was maybe a conceptual thing for a comedic performance to be. She is so no nonsense at the beginning and then completely sells the transformation. This is a delightful performance.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many Greta Garbo movies, and I hadn't seen this one since maybe high school. It was kind of all new to me, and I really dug it. You know, it's not your typical kind of Oscar fare. It's more comedic in tone. Billy Wilder was one of the co-writers of this before he became, a force of a director. And you feel the Wilder touch in this screenplay. It's just very creative and inventive, and Garbo just looks to be having the greatest time because she had a few nominations before, had never won yet. I don't know, I would float her around second place. Maybe she wasn't third, but this is a great Oscar nomination for Best Actress. All right, Cody, that takes us to the winner. Best Actress, 1939 at the Academy Awards, Vivien Leigh, Gone with the Wind, playing the Southern Belle Scarlett O'Hara living through the Civil War, falling in and out of love with the roguish Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable. What do we think of Vivien Leigh's performance all these years later in Gone with the Wind?
I mean, it's incredible. It's one of the best performances to win not only this category, but any Oscar. It is an incredible breakthrough performance. She comes out of essentially nowhere, wins the most high-profile role in Hollywood history up to that point, and knocks it out of the park. The movie is completely reliant on her. She's in at least like 80% of the scenes in the film, I think was what I read. She's all over this movie, playing a difficult character. She is very unsympathetic in what she does, but you want to root for her. You want to root for her to come out on top because she is so scrappy and resourceful and devious in a way that's really compelling to watch.
I think her performance in this movie is considered one of the finest of all time. And you might say, well, okay, let's bring it down a notch. Watching this movie 2 nights ago, she just blew me away in this thing. I mean, you think about how she had just done like a couple like small roles in British movies before, and every single woman in the world wanted this part of Scarlett O'Hara, the biggest movie of the year. And I mean, I was thinking about, just imagine all the pressure on her shoulders with this part. She's in, as you said, like 80% of the movie. And she just attacks every scene with gusto as if she's been acting in movies for 15, 20 years. She knows that character. She finds that character very quickly. It's just a performance that is beautiful from beginning to end. Her arc is incredible. And yeah, one of the reasons I think she wins is that she is opinionated, snarky, difficult, fiery, but you love her still. Like, you still root for her. And I think that's a big part of why she's so successful in this role.
The movie itself is tough. It's a complicated watch, obviously. Yeah. The film is so unquestionably well made that it almost like a magic trick makes you excited to watch what's happening. And then you have to like remind yourself, no, this is a horrible thing we're seeing depicted. But I think that actually is kind of the secret of the film's lasting legacy. Because to me, this is a completely unquestionably well-made ode to waste. At one point, Rhett Butler says something like, I'm angry. Waste makes me angry after Gettysburg happens and all these soldiers are dead for this cause. And that's how I feel about the movie. You're watching something that is just so powerful and so effectively made and acted. And as a piece of visual art, which is the medium that we're talking about and that we love the most, it is unquestionably a triumph of transforming still images into moving images into something that impacts you, a fictional story. But at the same time, it is, again, celebrating and telling the story and wanting you to root for the triumph of people committing atrocities. So to me, it's a really powerful example of what film can do, for better or for worse. And part of that success lies in Vivien Leigh's performance, lies in the fact that she is playing somebody so reprehensible, just as the movie is depicting a reprehensible society. And yet maybe if you don't want her to succeed, you're still compelled by her story. And it would be really easy for this character to be so annoying or so unwatchable because she just keeps committing, misdeeds and taking advantage of people and being shrewd and calculating in a way that could come across as, why am I watching this story? Why am I watching this for 4 hours? The story of this horrible person. But again, if you zoom out in a macro level, that is kind of the movie in totality. Why am I watching the story of these horrible people? But thanks to the power of filmmaking and image making, it comes across as still really compelling, regardless of anything else.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I think she has a level of vulnerability in this movie as well. Like, even when she's like acting as if she's super strong and has all the answers, you can tell like there is this vulnerability to her, and she doesn't quite know what to do and say next. And her love for these different men and how it's not always reciprocated. And it's like, what's she going to do? And how is she going to deal with this really horrific time and, in American history? I just think it's a very complex, deeply felt performance all the way through, especially for a movie made in 1939. A lot of those kind of performances now, they kind of go over our heads, and it's like, okay, it's like maybe too calculated, or like the process of the acting itself, it doesn't feel very contemporary now. But I didn't feel that at all watching Gone with the Wind again. I thought she was just spectacular in this movie. And as a film, just on a level of craft, it still holds up. I mean, Cody, there are shots in that film that continue to take my breath away. At least 3 or 4. I was like, wow. I mean, I can't imagine being in the audience in 1939, seeing this in color on a big screen. They must have gone crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the movie makes such good use of silhouette and shadow and scale, and it is a propulsive film despite its length. You don't really feel it sag. It is not boring at all. It is really, again, the word I keep coming back to is compelling. And Vivien Leigh is right there at the center of most of it. So much of the movie relies on just her face. They'll push the camera in and she'll have one eyebrow raised, and it's just such good awareness of the power of a face. And that comes from both the director and Vivien Leigh.
So yeah, I think, as we'll talk about like why she won, it's pretty obvious in a sense. Like there's a bunch of reasons. It's just like, I mean, she's in the biggest film of the year, the most beloved movie of 1939. And as you said, she is the face of it. She is in almost every scene for 4 hours. You can't say that about any other character in the film. So it makes zero sense for Gone with the Wind to win Best Picture and Best Director, and do very well, win 10 Oscars total, and not have her win Best Actress. Like, she, in a sense, would be like the most obvious win of all of those.
It's just such an assured performance. And the funny thing is, another element of the performance that's impressive is she's British. So she's doing an accent the entire movie. And to my ear, maybe it's not an authentic accent for what they're going for with the time period and the setting, but it doesn't slip. The accent that she's in is locked in. And I had a realization watching the movie. I don't know what she sounded like outside of film, because I've only seen her, I believe, in her 2 Oscar-winning roles, which are this and then Blanche DuBois in Streetcar Named Desire, another famous Southern character. So to me, she has this kind of lilt to her voice that in real life, I am sure she did not actually have. I don't know what she sounds like in real life.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite double acting Oscar wins for somebody. Like, I mean, if you're going to win 2, Gone with the Wind and A Streetcar Named Desire, it's kind of great. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I also think there's just a deep emotional power to her performance. There are many, many scenes in the film where the camera is just on her face and she is crying and she has like a will to survive. It's like, how can you not vote for her in Best Actress? How can you not love that performance? Like, she ends the first part of it right before intermission with that just huge emotional moments. And then she does it again in the very last scene. You leave the theater thinking about her character and her performance. So yeah, I mean, she was always going to take Best Actress.
Absolutely. I mean, the movie's not a success without her. She's not a success without the movie, and both are true. So it's kind of a no-brainer Oscar win.
I also think she won because she was a bright new star at the time. And, you know, going back decades, the Academy often likes to award ingenues. As we saw with Mikey, Madison, and Nora, it still happens, you know, in recent years. So I don't think she had to be a huge star to win Best Actress. I think a lot of Academy members probably liked giving their award to someone new, a bright new star in the industry.
Definitely. Yeah, it's like they're calling their shot. They're locking in on this performer and saying, great job. We'd like to see more of that in the future.
And one other thing I listed, the electric chemistry she has with Clark Gable in this movie. Like, if that didn't work, like from the early scenes to the end, if there wasn't chemistry between those 2 actors, I think the movie might have fumbled a bit. But there is like this amazing chemistry between those 2. Not like the most obvious, like 2 actors you would pair in a romantic relationship that would work on the screen, but it works. And it works beautifully.
Yeah, they both have a kind of roguish, we are outside of the normal, you know, Southern gentility that everybody else in this movie and this story espouses and lives for. So in that way, they were just made for each other.
So anything else to say about Vivien Lee's Oscar win for Gone with the Wind? How do you think it looks now, Cody, all these decades later?
I think it holds up well. I think it's hard to argue with. If you're looking at especially her competition this year, she's unquestionably the best one. But even in the pantheon of nominees and winners in this category, she's top tier.
I mean, I would have to say, in Best Actress, this is one of my favorite Oscar wins. I think she is one of our great actresses. I love that she also won years later for A Streetcar Named Desire in, a character that's got some similar qualities, I guess you could argue, with Scarlett O'Hara, but is a very different kind of performance overall. She never got another Oscar nomination right. It was just the 2. And then she won.
Perfect record.
And then she called it a day. But yeah, if you haven't seen Gone with the Wind in a long while, if you haven't watched Vivien Lee's performance in this movie as Scarlett O'Hara in a bit, like, do yourself a favor. There's a lot of great power in this movie on a cinematography level, on a storytelling level, especially that lead performance by Vivien Leigh. Truly a Best Actress Oscar win for the ages.